A week later, Esperanza put yet another bundle of asparagus on the table after work. The tall and feathery asparagus plant seemed to be as unrelenting as Isabel's desire to be queen. The workers picked the spears from the fields, and a few days later, the same fields had to be picked again because new shoots were already showing their heads. And Isabel talked of nothing else except the possibility of wearing the winter's crown of flowers on her head. I hate asparagus, said Isabel, barely looking up from her homework. During grapes, you hate grapes. During potatoes, you hate potatoes. And during asparagus, you hate asparagus. I suppose that during peaches, you will hate peaches. Isabel laughed. No, I love peaches. Hortensia stirred a pot of beans, and Esperanza took off the stained apron she wore in the sheds and put on another. She began measuring the flour to make tortillas. In a few minutes, she was patting the fresh dough that left her hands looking as if she wore white gloves. My teacher will choose the Queen of the May this week, said Isabel. Her entire body wiggled with excitement. Yes, you have told us, said Esperanza, teasing her. Do you have anything new to tell us? They're making a new camp for people from Oklahoma, said Isabel. Esperanza looked at Hortensia. Is that true? Hortensia nodded. They announced it at the camp meeting. The owner of the farm bought some army barracks from an old military camp and is moving them onto the property not too far from here. They get inside toilets and hot water and a swimming pool, said Isabel. Our teacher told us all about it, and we will all be able to swim in it. 1 day a week, sort of Hortensia, looking at Esperanza. The Mexicans could only swim on Friday afternoons before they clean the pool on Saturday mornings. Esperanza pounded the dough a little too hard. Do they think we are dirtier than the others? Hortensia did not answer, but turned to the stove to cook a tortilla on the flat black comal over the flame. She looked at Esperanza and held her finger to her mouth, signaling her not to discuss too much in front of Isabel. Miguel walked in, kissed his mother, then picked up a plate and a fresh tortilla and went to the pot of beans. His clothes were covered in mud that had dried gray. How did you get so dirty? Asked Hortensia. Miguel sat down at the table. A group of men showed up from Oklahoma. They said they would work for half the money, and the railroad hired all of them. He looked into his plate and shook his head. Some of them have never even worked on a motor before. My boss said that he didn't need me, that they were going to train the new men. He said I could dig ditches or lay tracks if I wanted. Esperanza stared at him, her floured hands in midair. What did you do? Can you not tell from my clothes? I dug ditches. His voice was sharp, but he continued eating as if nothing were wrong. Miguel, how could you agree to such a thing? Said Esperanza. Miguel raised his voice. What would you have me do instead? I could have walked out, but I would have no pay today. Those men from Oklahoma have families too. We must all work at something or we all will starve. A temper Esperanza did not recognize raged to the surface. Then, like the irrigation pipes in the fields when the water is first turned on, her anger burst forth. Why didn't your boss tell the others to dig the ditches? She looked at the dough she was holding in her hand and threw it at the wall. It stuck for an instant, and then slowly slid down the wall, leaving a darkened trail. Isabel's eyes darted from Miguel to Esperanza to Hortensia. Are we going to starve? No, they all answered at the same time. Esperanza's eyes were on fire. She stamped out of the cabin, slamming the door, and walked past the mulberry and chinaberry trees to the vineyard. She hurried down a row, then cut over to another. Esperanza! She heard Miguel's voice in the distance, but she didn't answer. When she got to the end of one row, she moved up to another. Anza! She could hear him running down the rows, catching up with her. She kept her eyes on the tamarisk trees in the far distance and walked faster. Miguel eventually caught her arm and pulled her around. What is the matter with you? Is this the better life that you left Mexico for? Is it? Nothing is right here. Isabel will certainly not be queen, no matter how badly she wants it to be because she is Mexican. You cannot work on engines because you are Mexican. You have gone to work through angry crowds of our own people who threw rocks at us, and I'm afraid they might have been right. They send people back to Mexico even if they don't belong there, just for speaking up. We live in a horse stall, and none of this bothers you? Have you heard they are building a new swimming pool for Okies? The Mexicans can only swim in it on the afternoon before they clean it. Have you heard they will be given inside toilets and hot water? Why is that? Miguel, is it because they are the fairest in the land? Tell me, is this life really better than being a servant in Mexico? Miguel looked out over the grapes, where the sun set low on the horizon, casting long shadows in the vineyard. He turned back to her. In Mexico, I was a second-class citizen. I stood on the other side of the river, remember? And I would have stayed that way my entire life. At least here I have a chance, however small, to become more than what I was. You, obviously, could never understand this because you have never lived without hope. She clenched her fists and closed her eyes tight in frustration. Miguel, do you not understand? You are still a second-class citizen because you act like one. Letting them take advantage of you like that? Why don't you go to your boss and confront him? Why don't you speak up for yourself and your talents? You are beginning to sound like the strikers, Esperanza, said Miguel coldly. There is more than one way to get what you want in this country. Maybe I must be more determined than others to succeed, but I know that it will happen. Wait a little while, and the fruit will fall into your hand. The words stopped her, as if someone had slapped her face. Papa's words. But she was tired of waiting. She was tired of Mama being sick, and Abuelita being far away, and Papa being dead. As she thought about Papa, tears sprang from her eyes, and she suddenly felt weary, as if she had been clinging to a rope, but didn't have the strength to hold on any longer. She sobbed with her eyes closed and imagined she was falling, with the wind whooshing past her and nothing but darkness below. Anza, could I fall all the way back to Mexico if I never opened my eyes again? She felt Miguel's hand on her arm and opened her eyes. Anza, everything will work out, he said. Esperanza backed away from him and shook her head. How do you know these things, Miguel? Do you have some prophecy that I do not? I have lost everything, every single thing, and all the things that I was meant to be. See these perfect rows, Miguel? They are like what my life was going to have been. These rows know where they are going, straight ahead. Now my life is like the zigzag in the blanket on Mama's bed. I need to get Abuelita here, but I cannot even send her my pitiful savings, for fear my uncles will find out and keep her there forever. I pay Mama's medical bills, but next month there will be more. I can't stand your blind hope. I don't want to hear your optimism about this land of possibility when I see no proof. As bad as things are, we have to keep trying. But it does no good. Look at yourself. Are you standing on the other side of the river? No. You are still a peasant. With eyes as hard as green plums, Miguel stared at her, and his face contorted into a disgusted grimace. And you still think you are a queen.